Hey beauties and beasts! Okay, it's time to grab your skincare, your drink, and light some candles because we're going inside one of Korea's most haunted places, Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital. So let me first set the scene for you. It's past midnight and you're standing in a pitch black hallway. The beam of your flashlight slices through the dark, paint peeling, debris everywhere, eerie graffiti on the walls. Every step echoes, and something moves at the end of the corridor. This is an imagination. Thousands have felt the same chill at Gonjiam. So terrifying, CNN named it one of the 7 freakiest places on Earth. Tonight, we will walk those halls where dozens of patients allegedly died. And we're going to pass the director's cursed office and face the infamous Room 402, the door no one has ever opened. So are you ready? Let's go inside. Deep in the mountains of Gyeonggi province, about an hour outside Seoul, there once stood a building that people spoke of only in whispers, Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital. The structure itself seemed designed for nightmares. 3 stories of concrete and steel, isolated in the forest, accessible only by winding mountain roads that twisted through the trees like serpents. During the day, it was merely unsettling, but at night, the building seemed to breathe. The hospital operated throughout the late 1980s and into the 1990s. So by all accounts, it was a standard psychiatric facility, treating patients with severe mental illnesses, employing a full staff of doctors and nurses. Nothing remarkable. But then in 1996, something happened. The hospital closed abruptly, without any warning. And here's where it gets strange. When the doors locked for the final time, nothing was cleared out. Patient records remained scattered across desks. Medical equipment stood where it had been left mid-use. Beds were still made, as if waiting for patients who would never return. Medication bottles lined the shelves. Even personal belongings, patient clothing, photographs, letters, all remained behind. It was as if everyone had simply vanished. The building was abandoned, left to rot in the mountains, and that is when the stories began. The most persistent legend, the one that sends chills down the spine of anyone who heard it, was the story of 42 patients. To understand how this legend spread, you need to understand South Korea in the late 1990s and early 2000s. The internet was exploding. Online forums and message boards became places where people shared urban legends, ghost stories, and unexplained phenomena. And Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital became the subject of obsessive discussion. The story began simply enough. Someone posted online that they'd heard from a friend whose relative had worked at the hospital. So according to the secondhand account, something had gone terribly wrong in the months before the closure. Patients had started dying. At first, it was 1 patient, then another a week later, then 2 in the same night. The deaths were sudden, unexpected, and according to the story, completely inexplicable. No clear medical cause, no warning signs, just death. The hospital staff allegedly tried to keep it quiet. They didn't want panic. They didn't want investigations. But families of patients started asking questions. Why had their loved ones died so suddenly? What had the hospital been doing to them? And then the stories started to diverge, splitting into different versions that spread across the internet like wildfire. One popular version claimed that the doctors at Gonjiam had been conducting secret experiments. This was the 1990s. Psychiatric medicine was still controversial in South Korea. where mental illness carried heavy stigma and oversight was lax compared to Western countries. So according to this version, the hospital had been testing experimental procedures on patients without proper consent. Lobotomies performed off the books, electroshock therapy pushed to dangerous levels, untested medications administered in doses far beyond what was legal. The experiments, the story went, were designed to find faster, cheaper ways to cure psychiatric patients. But they went wrong, terribly wrong. Patients started having seizures, psychotic breaks, complete mental collapses. And then they started dying. The hospital director, realizing what he'd done, tried to cover it up, but the deaths kept mounting. 1, 3, 7, 15, 23. By early 1996, there were only 42 patients left in that hospital, and they knew they were next. Another version of the legend was even darker. This one suggested that it wasn't experiments that killed the patients, it was something else, something in the building itself. According to the story, the hospital director began acting strangely in late 1995. Staff members reported that he would stand in empty corridors, staring at walls, muttering to himself. And he stopped sleeping. His appearance deteriorated. He became paranoid, convinced that something was watching him. Then patients started reporting the same symptoms. They claimed they heard voices in the walls, saw shadows moving in their peripheral vision, felt cold hands touching them at night. One by one, patients began descending into madness, not from their original mental illnesses, but from something new, something that seemed to infect everyone in the building. The director, driven to the edge of sanity, allegedly became convinced that the hospital was cursed, that something evil had taken root in the foundation, in the walls, in the very air they breathed. And he tried to have the building blessed by Buddhist monks. They refused after setting foot inside, claiming the place was spiritually poisoned. He tried to evacuate the patients, but by then, bureaucratic red tape and the stigma surrounding mental health made it nearly impossible to transfer dozens of patients to other facilities quickly. So they stayed, and the madness spread. Nurses quit, doctors transferred to other hospitals. The staff dwindled until only the director and a skeleton crew remained, trying desperately to care for 42 patients who were losing their minds to something they couldn't see or fight. Both versions of the legend, the experiments and the madness, converge on the same terrible conclusion. On one night in early 1996, something broke. According to the story that spread across Korean internet forums, the 42 remaining patients reached a collective decision. Whether driven by fear of more experiments or driven mad by whatever haunted the hospital's halls, or simply unable to endure their suffering any longer, they chose to end it. Some versions say they found a way to communicate with each other in secret, planning their escape through death. Others suggest it was spontaneous, a shared psychosis that swept through the wards like wildfire. But the result was the same. 42 patients took their own lives. Not gradually, not over weeks or months, all on the same night. They allegedly hanged themselves with bed sheets. Others ingested medications they'd been hoarding. A few, according to rumors, found even more disturbing methods. The details varied depending on who was telling the story, but the image was always horrifying. A hospital full of the dead, discovered when the morning staff arrived for their shift. The scene that greeted them was allegedly so traumatic that several staff members quit on the spot and never spoke of what they'd witnessed. And here's where the legend gets even more sinister. According to the online stories, authorities arrived and immediately sealed off the hospital. No media was notified, no public announcement was made. The bodies were removed quietly. The families paid off or threatened into silence. And the hospital was shut down with a vague excuse about regulatory issues. The official story, the one given to the public, was that the hospital had closed for financial reasons, nothing more. But people who lived in the area supposedly knew better. They'd heard the ambulances that night, seen the police cars, watched as body bags were carried out in the pre-dawn darkness. The director, some versions say he took his own life in his office, overcome with guilt. Others claim he vanished entirely. Some say he fled to America. Others insist he simply walked into the forest one night and was never seen again. The building owner, an elderly man who'd invested his life savings into the hospital, allegedly died less than a year later. Heart attack, the official cause. But locals say that he'd been destroyed by what happened, consumed by guilt and grief. His sons inherited the property. They lived in America. When they learned about the hospital and its history, they reportedly refused to ever return to Korea. They wouldn't demolish the building, too expensive, and who would do the work once they learned the history? And they wouldn't sell it. Who would buy it? So the building simply sat, abandoned, locked, left to rot, with all its secrets still inside. But here is what made the story truly spread. It was believable. Psychiatric hospitals in 1990s South Korea weren't well regulated. Mental illness was heavily stigmatized. Families often institutionalized relatives and then tried to forget about them. Abuse in psychiatric facilities, while not common, wasn't unheard of. So when people heard about Gonjiam, they thought, that could have happened. That probably did happen. The legend fit too perfectly into existing fears about how mentally ill patients were treated. It confirmed suspicions people already had about corruption and cover-ups. It gave a face, or rather a number, to the nameless victims of a system that failed them. Okay, so by the early 2000s, word of Gonjiam had spread beyond South Korea. Urban explorers, paranormal investigators, and thrill seekers from around the world began making pilgrimages to the abandoned hospital. And they came back with stories. In the fall of 2015, 3 college students visited Gonjiam on a dare. They arrived around 11 p.m., equipped with nothing but flashlights and bravado. They started on the first floor, checking rooms one by one. Most were empty, doors hanging off hinges, windows shattered. But as they climbed to the second floor, something changed. They found a room. They couldn't remember the exact number, just that it was different from all the others, where the door was perfectly intact, closed, locked. That's weird, one of them said. Every other door is broken. They tried the handle, but it wouldn't turn. They pushed, nothing. Then they heard a noise, a sound from inside the room. A dragging noise, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. All 3 froze. Did you hear that? They pressed their ears to the door. The dragging sound came again, closer this time, right behind the door. Then breathing. Or was it whispering? Then something slammed against the door from the inside, so hard the entire frame shook. They ran. They didn't speak. They didn't look back. Just ran down the stairs, through the hallways, out into the night. When they reached the parking lot and finally stopped to catch their breath, one of them looked back at the building. There was a light in one of the second-floor windows. A pale, flickering glow like a candle or a flashlight beam moving back and forth. But they'd been the only ones in the building. Hadn't they? In 2012, a professional paranormal investigator from Seoul spent a night alone in Gonjiam, equipped with EMF detectors, thermal cameras, and audio recording equipment. He lasted 6 hours. His report, posted online, described escalating phenomena throughout the night. At first, just small things, cold spots that moved through rooms, shadows that appeared on his thermal camera where nothing should be visible. Then his equipment began malfunctioning, cameras shutting off despite fresh batteries, audio recorders picking up voices speaking in whispers too quiet to make out. Around 3 a.m., he entered what he believed was the director's office. The moment he crossed the threshold, every piece of equipment he carried died simultaneously. His flashlight, his cameras, his phone, he stood in absolute darkness. And that is when he heard it, footsteps behind him. And those footsteps were slowly getting closer. He fumbled for his lighter, managed to produce a flame, and the footsteps stopped. He was alone in that room. But the air had changed, thicker, and it was cold, so cold he could even see his breath, even though it was August. He made it to the parking lot by dawn, got in his car, and drove straight home without looking back. He never returned to Gonjiam. He refused to even discuss what else he'd experienced during those 6 hours. Some things, he wrote, are not meant to be investigated. In 2014, a television crew brought a shaman to Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital for a documentary. The shaman, an elderly woman who had conducted hundreds of spiritual cleansings, agreed to perform a ritual to communicate with any spirits that might remain. But when she stepped through the entrance, she immediately stopped. Her face went pale. Her hands began to shake. "We need to leave," she said. "Now." The crew tried to convince her to continue. They'd come all this way, set up equipment, promoted the show. "There are a lot of spirits here," the shaman insisted. "Many spirits, not one or two, dozens. They are angry, they're in pain, they haven't found peace." "How many?" the producer asked. The shaman closed her eyes as if counting something invisible. 42, she whispered. "There are 42 spirits trapped in this building." The crew went silent. How could she have known that number? They hadn't told her the legend, hadn't briefed her on the 42 patients. "They died here," the shaman continued, her voice barely audible. "They died badly, and they cannot leave. Something keeps them here, something in the walls, in the foundation, in the very bones of this place." She refused to go any further. The ritual was canceled, but the documentary aired anyway, and the shaman's testimony became one of the most cited pieces of evidence that Gonjiam was truly haunted. 42 spirits, the exact number from the legend. Could it be a coincidence? But of all the stories, of all the legends and testimonies and terrifying accounts, one stood above the rest. Room 402. According to every source, every urban explorer who'd ever entered Gonjiam, Room 402 was different. It was special. It was cursed. So this room was said to be the intensive care unit, the room where the sickest, most disturbed patients were kept, the room where the worst of the experiments allegedly took place, the room where, some claimed, the director himself had conducted his final, most horrific procedure before going mad. But here's what made Room 402 truly terrifying. No one could open the door. No explorers with crowbars. Not investigators with lockpicking tools. The door remained sealed, as if something on the other side was holding it shut. People who stood outside Room 402 reported feeling an overwhelming sense of dread. Temperature dropped so severe their breath misted in summer heat. Sounds from within, scratching, whispers, the squeak of a wheelchair. One testimony claimed that placing your hand on the door caused intense burning pain, as if the metal itself were alive and angry. Another described seeing shadows move beneath the door, cast by something inside, even though no light source existed in the room. In 2017, a group of YouTubers attempted to break down the door to Room 402. They brought sledgehammers, power tools, everything they could carry up the mountain. The footage they posted showed them striking the door repeatedly, making no progress. Then, without warning, the lead YouTuber dropped his sledgehammer and stumbled backward, clutching his head. "Did you hear that?" he gasped. "Hear what?" "The screaming inside. Someone screaming inside." None of the other crew members heard anything, but on the audio recording, enhanced by viewers at home, you can hear it, a faint, warbling sound beneath the noise of their tools. In 2012, everything changed for Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital. CNN Travel published an article titled "The 7 Freakiest Places Around the World." It was a list of locations that were, in CNN's words, authentically and unintentionally weird, macabre, and mysterious. The list included Aokigahara Forest in Japan, the infamous forest where hundreds have taken their lives; Chernobyl Amusement Park in Ukraine, frozen in time since the nuclear disaster; the Sedlec Ossuary in Czech Republic, decorated with the bones of 40,000 people; the Island of Dolls in Mexico, covered in dismembered dolls. And alongside these genuinely dark places, CNN listed Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital. The eerily empty halls of this former psychiatric hospital are not for the faint-hearted, CNN wrote. Its grim past is ever present, and it is known for being haunted. And just like that, overnight, Gonjiam became internationally famous. Urban explorers from America, Europe, Australia descended on the small South Korean town. YouTube channels dedicated to paranormal investigation made Gonjiam their holy grail. The hospital appeared in documentaries, podcasts, blog posts, and Reddit threads. A horror movie was inevitable. In March 2018, director Chung Bom-sik released Gonjiam, Haunted Asylum, a found-footage horror film that told the story of a crew of YouTubers exploring the abandoned hospital, desperate to open room 402 and capture proof of the paranormal on camera. The movie is absolutely terrifying. It used the actual legends, the 42 patients, the mad director, the locked room, and built them into a narrative so convincing that audiences left theaters genuinely shaken. And the film became the 3rd highest grossing horror movie in South Korean history, earning over $21 million. International audiences discovered it on streaming platforms. And suddenly, the legend of Gonjiam had spread to every corner of the globe. And by May 2018, the situation had spiraled out of control. Thousands of trespassers invaded the property every month. Security guards couldn't keep up. Local residents couldn't sleep. Police were overwhelmed. And people were getting injured on the unstable structure and suing the property owner. The building owner, exhausted, bankrupt from legal fees, unable to sell the property because of its reputation, made a decision. On May 28, 2018, demolition crews arrived at Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital. Heavy machinery tore into the building. Walls came down, windows shattered. The 3-story structure that had terrorized a nation collapsed into a rubble. It took 2 days. By May 30th, 2018, Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital was gone. Just empty land remained. But the workers who demolished the building told strange stories afterward. They reported that some crew members refused to work after dark, claiming they heard sounds from inside the building even as it was being torn apart. Others said their machinery malfunctioned more than it should, breaking down repeatedly in ways that just couldn't be explained. One demolition worker gave an interview to a local newspaper. "We finish during the day. We refuse to work at night. Some places, you just know. You can feel it." So today, a Kupang logistics center, essentially South Korea's version of an Amazon warehouse, stands on the land where Gonjiam once rotted. Thousands of packages pass through the site every day. But some employees claim the location is still wrong, that they hear things late at night, that the air feels heavy in certain sections of the warehouse, that machines malfunction in patterns they just can't explain. The building is gone, but is it really over? So, what really happened at Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital? After everything I've told you, after the 42 patients, the locked room, the shaman's testimony, the testimonies of investigators, the CNN recognition, the international fame, what's the truth? In fact, according to official records, nothing happened at Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital. Okay, let me explain. The hospital was approved for construction on August 11th, 1982. It operated as a standard psychiatric facility, completely ordinary, completely normal, until July 1996. So this facility closed not because of mysterious deaths or experiments, but because of South Korea's Water Source Protection Act. The law required the hospital to install an expensive new sewage treatment system. The building owner and the hospital director disagreed about who should pay for it. While they argued, the building owner, an elderly man, died in May 1997 from natural causes. His sons inherited the property, but they'd already immigrated to the United States and had no interest in managing a psychiatric hospital remotely. So they left it abandoned. That's it. That is the entire story. There were no 42 patients who died altogether. In fact, there were no mysterious deaths at all. When the hospital closed, all patients were transferred to Yongin Mental Hospital. The transfer was documented and verified by authorities. The director didn't go mad and didn't kill himself. He is still alive. After Gonjiam closed, he opened another psychiatric facility in Gangwon province, where he continued practicing medicine for years. Okay, what about room 402? The real Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital was only 3 stories tall. There was no 4th floor. So room 402 couldn't physically exist. The director of the 2018 movie invented it as a reference to the Sewol Ferry disaster, which occurred on April 16th, 2014. He thought 416 was too obvious, so he chose 402. It was symbolism, not history. And the shaman, who claimed to sense 42 spirits, she appeared on a ghost hunting television show in 2008 called Ghost Spot. These shows are entertainment, not documentation. They're designed to create scares, not report facts. In 2012, a South Korean investigative program thoroughly debunked every legend about Gonjiam. They interviewed this director, who was understandably furious about being accused of murder. They spoke to local police, who confirmed there had never been any investigation into deaths at that hospital. They reviewed official records showing all patients had been safely transferred. And the movie, that was actually shot at Busan National Maritime High School, not at Gonjiam itself. The building owner actually sued to try to stop the film's release, arguing it would make his property impossible to sell. And he lost the lawsuit. The movie came out anyway. 2 months later, in May 2018, he demolished the building. So that is the official story, the facts, the documented truth. But here is where it gets complicated. Because while we can debunk the legend of the 42 patients, while we can prove the director didn't kill himself, while we can explain that room 402 never existed, we just cannot explain why thousands of people reported experiencing something in that building. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands of people. People from different countries, different backgrounds, visiting at different times over more than a decade. People who'd never heard the legends before visiting. People who went in skeptical and came out terrified. So they reported the same things: overwhelming feelings of dread in certain rooms, temperature drops that couldn't be explained by weather or ventilation, sounds, footsteps, dragging, whispers in empty corridors, equipment malfunctions at rates that seem beyond coincidence, the sensation of being watched, followed, or even touched. Now, yeah, power of suggestion is real. Abandoned buildings are creepy. Our minds play tricks in darkness. Fear can make us see and hear things that aren't there. But all of them, every single person who reported something strange, the demolition crews who refused to work at night, even though night shifts paid more, the security guards who quit after a few weeks, saying this place felt wrong. Police officers who, off the record, admitted they hated responding to calls there because even they felt uncomfortable inside. I don't know, maybe it was just the perfect storm of psychological factors: isolation, decay, stigma around mental illness, the power of urban legend, and the human tendency to seek patterns and meaning in randomness. Or maybe whatever was at Gonjiam, whether psychological, spiritual, or something we don't have words for, is still there. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. They are meant to remind us that the world is stranger, more complex, and more unsettling than we'd like to believe. Okay, that is the end of our long story. I hope you liked today's video. Sweet dreams, guys, and see you in our next episode. Bye-bye.